Just choose what's more fun for you. Anyway, whatever your opinion is on the Quickie Launcher, at least it's not the Scottish... It's not the Scottish Resistance!
What the bloody hell? And if you think you're better than me, you're looking for another think. Alright, I'll take both of you on, you foolish chicken.
Let's talk about the Scottish Resistance.
Wait a minute, why is the cynical enthusiast doing a TF2 video? I thought he was supposed to be doing a review of Avatar.
Is what I imagine you're saying right now. Well, imaginary person, to that I say, I don't care. Now, that is not to say that I'm quitting the Avatar review. No, that was my premiere project, and you can be sure I'm going to finish it. However, it's not the only thing I'm going to do. My channel isn't just about media criticism, it's about critical analysis in any form. If I can analyze something, I can do a video on it. By analyzing the things I choose to analyze, whether it's writing or gameplay mechanics, I hope to one day become really good at them.
But cynical enthusiast.
Cries the fictional caricature I've created to preempt the audience response.
Other people have already done videos on this subject, and no one can ever do the same thing someone else has done.
Well, imaginary idiot, that's where you're wrong, kiddo. First of all, there's a finite number of weapons in TF2, and just because one person does a video first doesn't mean they deserve the exclusive right to be the person who covered that weapon. Every person who covers a TF2 weapon will bring their own knowledge, experience, and opinions to the table, shedding new light on how to effectively use the weapon and hopefully contributing something to the discussion. At least that's what I aim to do. Another person who made a video on this weapon might even think it's bad. They'll be wrong, of course, but they're entitled to that opinion. The discussion of TF2 weapons is inherently one where each person builds on the work of others. Want some examples? Zesty Jesus has adopted a method for statistically testing a weapon's effectiveness created by TooftyTV. Another YouTuber, Fishstick on a Stick, has benefited from the information collected by Toofty in his own analysis. And I myself, later in this video, will be implementing a system of measuring a weapon's objective quality, which was created by the aforementioned Zesty Jesus. So don't tell me I'm not allowed to cover a weapon just because it's already been covered in someone else's video. That's like saying only one media outlet is allowed to cover a story, or that only one scientist should be responsible for experimenting to test a hypothesis. So, as I was saying, let's talk about the Scottish Resistance. The Scottish Resistance is a secondary weapon for the Demoman. It is not community created, instead being made by Valve themselves, back in the days before they realized that it's much easier to get the community to create content for your game, rather than doing it yourself. It can be unlocked by completing 17 Demoman achievements, via random drops, or by, using a trading website. The main draw of this weapon is that it grants the user the ability to detonate sticky bombs selectively based on the position of their crosshair, rather than detonating them all at once. This is a big deal since it means you're capable of having more than one trap at once. To aid in sticky jumping, any sticky bombs directly under your feet will be detonated as well. This prevents sticky jumping from being made more difficult by the use of this weapon, but you also run the risk of blowing yourself up as a result. In this clip, I managed to kill the enemy spy with a sticky trap, but accidentally detonate a sticky bomb that's right next to me, bringing myself down to 10 health and coming dangerously close to blowing myself up.
Oh man! Oh god! Oh man!
Something similar happens in this other clip, though thankfully I had more health and so was in a much better position. However, in this third clip, I'm not so lucky and paid the full price for my carelessness. Additionally, despite not being listed in the stats, the outline of your bombs will be visible through walls, which helps you keep track of where they are at all times. Their outlines will also become team-colored in order to indicate which bombs will be detonated if you were to right-click, and since they're detonated within a certain angle of your crosshair, you'll also have less precision when detonating them the further away they are. The Scottish Resistance also comes with the bonus of being able to have 6 more sticky bombs active at the same time than stock, for a total of 14. This synergizes extremely well with its main upside, and results in a far greater ability for the player to create effective traps. This weapon has a handful of other upsides, which are small but still worth noting. Firstly, it has 25% faster firing speed than stock. This isn't a huge difference, but it does help you get your traps up quicker. It also has a 50% larger ammo reserve than stock, but this doesn't really matter that much as you're not usually going to be running out of sticky bombs anyway. Lastly, while using this weapon, your sticky bombs can destroy enemy sticky bombs. Demoman's regular stickies are quite good for knocking enemy stickies out of the way, but actually destroying them will require a melee hit, which is both risky and extremely slow. Being able to directly destroy enemy sticky bombs with your own makes you the best class for eliminating them. 1 or 2 of your own sticky bombs is usually all it takes to destroy an enemy Demoman's trap, and the area of effect means that you don't have to aim as carefully as a bullet firing class would.
The only classes who can even compete with you when it comes to destroying sticky bombs are pyros and engineers who are using a short circuit, but pyros will still have to take the time to shoot a trap after airblasting it if they want to destroy it. Unless they're using the scorch shot, which does splash damage that destroys sticky bombs, just like the Scottish Resistance. But if you do use the scorch shot, you're not doing it for that, you're doing it because you're a terrible person. And the short circuit costs a lot of metal to do the same thing you can easily, at no significant cost to resources. This allows you to play much more of a support role than Demoman would usually be capable of, by destroying enemy sticky traps so your teammates don't have to deal with them. Plus, it gives you a big advantage in Demoman 1v1s, since you can simply delete any sticky traps they try to throw at you. This seems like quite a good weapon so far, so what's the cost for all the control you get both over your own sticky bombs and the sticky bombs of others? After all, every weapon in TF2 needs to have some sort of downside. The Scottish Resistance comes with the downside of a 0.8 second longer arm time, for a total of 1.5 seconds.
Oh.
This one stat fundamentally changes the way this weapon needs to be used. It strongly discourages sticky spam, since you'll rarely be able to detonate a sticky bomb before it hits the ground. As a result, this weapon is mostly thought of as being for defensive, campy demos. You know, the kind who just sets up traps in 3 different choke points and waits for someone to walk into them? Yeah, that guy. For most demos, this is enough to consider the Scottish Resistance a bad weapon. Demos love their sticky spam after all, and for good reason. It's really effective. However, I'd like to propose that the Scottish Resistance is actually quite a good weapon, and that you don't need sticky spam in order to be effective as a Demoman.
Take a deep breath. Forget the vices of the stock sticky bomb launcher and open your mind to the possibilities this weapon provides. Are you ready? Here we go.
If you want to use this weapon, you need to change the way you think about sticky bombs. With the stock launcher or the quickie bomb launcher, the launcher itself is the weapon, and the bombs are merely the projectiles the weapon shoots. With the Scottish Resistance, the opposite is true. The bombs themselves are the weapons, and the launcher is nothing more than a means to channel them. Once you understand this, you are ready to benefit from what this weapon has to offer. Now, how should you actually go about using it? Well, let's consider what its attributes actually mean in practice. The only ones here that really matter are the precision detonation, increased sticky bomb limit, and longer arm time. The faster firing speed, larger ammo reserve, and ability to destroy sticky bombs are nice, but they aren't going to have a huge impact on how you use the weapon. I mean, if you see an enemy sticky trap, you should destroy it, but that's all there really is to say about that. The biggest impact the precision detonation has is how it grants you more versatility in the utilization of your sticky traps. With any other sticky bomb launcher, when you're up against a single opponent, it's usually much more rewarding to just spam them out than to try and set up a trap. This is because when you do take the time to set up a sticky trap, the biggest problem with the stock sticky bomb launcher makes itself known. Because detonation is usually such an all-or-nothing endeavor, you're likely to end up getting distracted with your traps. The amount of effort that goes into creating a trap and is subsequently consumed upon detonation will probably make you want to wait until you can kill multiple people at once. The problem is that because you can't detonate individual sticky bombs with other launchers, keeping a trap up will require you to stop using your secondary weapon altogether. This invalidates the advantage that sticky spam gives you, and leaves you only your primary weapon to kill people with. This is symptomatic of the ineffectiveness that other launchers promote. True, multi-kills are flashy, and they are often a big help to your team, but if you're always going for them, you're going to miss out on the many opportunities to get picks on single opponents. The Scottish Resistance provides a nice middle ground between the hyper-offensive spam and the hyper-defensive traps. By allowing you to detonate only the sticky bombs you need in order to get a kill, it allows you to continue using it while having created other traps. It makes individual sticky bombs disposable in a way that other sticky launchers just don't. This way, you can continue being effective with this weapon while saving one of your traps for a big kill. Plus, once you do detonate that trap, you won't lose all your other stickies, and therefore won't be left at a disadvantage while you scramble to reset them. Thus, despite being an obviously more defensive weapon given how strongly it discourages sticky spam, you are actually able to be more aggressive when killing people with the sticky traps themselves. The playstyle this weapon promotes can be best described as passively aggressive. It makes it easy to simply place down a sticky bomb in an aggressive location where someone will walk into it. There's absolutely no shame in going for single kills. Remember, if you kill 3 individuals within a reasonable time frame, that's just as good as killing 3 people at the same time. You need to really go for these picks if you want to make the weapon's upsides work for you. The individual kills may not seem like that big a deal, but if you're consistently getting them, you can help put a stop to the enemy team's attempts to complete the objective. This is especially true on offense, where the enemy's respawn times are much longer than yours are.
It's over 9!
Plus, you can also function as an extremely effective pick class, using this precision elimination to kill important targets. Never forget how much a medic pick can turn the tide of the game. If you want to gain access to these spur-of-the-moment kills, however, you need to have sticky bombs there in the first place, so drop the defensive mindset. Don't wait for people to come to your traps, make sure your traps are where they're going to be. In his video on the classic, Fish Stick on a Stick said the following.
I saw a video a long time ago about how to effectively use the Beggar's Bazooka, and it basically said to always be loading rockets in, even when your enemies aren't nearby, because you never know when someone is just gonna rush at you with your pants down and run you over. That's basically how you have to play with the classic. Always be charging.
Using the Scottish resistance is exactly the same, but instead of charging, you should always be putting down sticky bombs. While using this weapon, you should always have all 14 sticky bombs out and be putting down more as you go, so as to bring the trap with you. Having an extra 6 sticky bombs out is a big upside, but it won't benefit you at all if you don't have them down in the first place. This is another way in which you have to really make the upsides work for you. Think of your stickies as an extension of yourself. When you're around your sticky bombs, you're at your most powerful. By carpeting an area in sticky bombs, you turn that area into your turf and give yourself a huge advantage both in direct combat and in using sticky traps to eliminate people. It's like a more intelligent alternative to sticky spam. After all, there's no need to shoot a sticky bomb at someone if there's one where they are already. Before you get into a 1v1, put some stickies in between you and your opponent, if you don't have some there already. Because of your ability to control which sticky bombs you detonate, using them in this way won't destroy any traps you had created previously, which makes doing so less costly than it would be with another sticky bomb launcher. When engaging you in combat in an area you've locked down with your sticky bombs, your opponent has 3 options, and all of them place them at a disadvantage. They can attempt to destroy the sticky bombs, in which case they leave themselves open to attack and spend less time dealing damage. They can try to avoid the sticky bombs, in which case their movement is limited, especially once you start using your grenades and they have to dodge.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
Or they can choose to ignore the sticky bombs, in which case they're an easy kill. Just wait for them to chase you and lure them into range of your stickies.
This is no less true against ubercharging opponents. When most people get ubercharged, they're likely to think they're basically untouchable, and won't look for your sticky bombs. However, by using the knockback from your explosions to knock the medic and or patient off a cliff, away from each other, or just generally out of position, you can prove them wrong. I mean, just look at this poor heavy! One minute he's charging down my team with an Ubering medic backing him up, and the next minute the medic is launched off a bridge, leaving him vulnerable, on fire, and forced to retreat, before getting cut off at the last second by an absolutely beautiful direct pipe. Ah, that's great. The only exception to this is the quick fix, since its Ubercharge grants immunity to all movement impairing effects, but since it doesn't actually grant any damage resistance, you can take out both the medic and patient by simply putting down enough stickies in one trap to deal more than their maximum overheal. 4 or 5 sticky bombs should do the trick.
They also won't be able to cause you to lose all your stickies by tricking you into detonating them at a bad time, since you'll be able to control which bombs are detonated, and so you'll still have some left over. To this effect, the Scottish resistance works well as a combo weapon. Normally, if your detonation doesn't kill anyone, it's a tremendous waste, but because the detonations with this weapon are less risky, you don't necessarily need to kill your opponent outright with the Scottish resistance for it to be effective. For most classes, even a single well-placed sticky will put them below the 100 health threshold, meaning you can finish them off with a single pipe. Like I do to this pyro here. Or to this pyro here. Or to this pyro here. Learn to air blast, guys, it's really useful. This works especially well against scouts, since even a good Demoman can struggle to get 2 direct hits on a strafing scout. But using your sticky bombs in conjunction with your grenades means you only need to hit 1. You can also do this in reverse, using a pipe to soften up your enemy and move them towards one of your traps. before finishing them off with your stickies, like I do to this soldier. I use the knockback from my grenades to put him in the perfect spot to be killed by my trap. Because of the Scottish Resistance's ability to detonate only the relevant sticky bombs, you can even combo into other stickies. By detonating certain stickies and saving others for later, you can knock an opponent from one to the next, like I do to this scout here. Look at that, dead before he even has time to react. If I had been using any other sticky bomb launcher, I never could have done that, and the damage potential of that second sticky bomb would have been lost. Using the Scottish Resistance removes the need to wait until an opponent is perfectly positioned in the middle of all your sticky bombs, and indeed, the need to put all your sticky bombs in one place in the first place. The phrase, "don't put all your eggs in one basket," comes to mind. Sound familiar? Well, you also shouldn't put all your sticky bombs in one location. By this point, it's probably clear to you that the Scottish Resistance works well for combos, and if that's not clear, then you need to pay better attention. But it's also worth mentioning that this effectiveness extends to team combos as well. Assist kills like this may not provide the same rush as killing someone on your own, but you're still contributing to your team, and that's what really counts. In this clip, I knock a pyro into the air with a sticky trap, but don't deal enough damage to actually kill him. However, a direct hit soldier takes advantage of the opportunity and finishes him off with an air shot. In another clip, I set up a sticky trap moments before a demo comes through the doorway, and detonate, allowing the heavy to easily finish him off. This clip provides a great opportunity for me to talk about prediction. In order to be effective with Scottish Resistance, you need to know where your enemies are likely to move and place your sticky bombs accordingly. This is true of creating sticky traps with any sticky launcher, but since you'll be creating traps much more actively with this weapon, it's especially important here. This is a tricky subject and mostly comes down to experience and intuition, but here are a few rules of thumb you can follow. Firstly, if your enemy is high on health, they will usually try to approach you. You should try placing some sticky bombs in their path, ideally while outside their line of sight so that they don't have the chance to react to it.
Dang. Lol, get out of here.
Secondly, if your opponent is low on health, they will likely try to retreat to a health pack. Try creating the preemptive sticky trap in order to close off their escape. If your prediction is good enough, you can even kill enemies you can't see in this way, such as cloaked spies or enemies that have left your line of sight. The Scottish Resistance will save you the trouble of remembering where your sticky bombs are, so you can more easily focus your efforts on creating a mental projection of your opponent's trajectory and detonating at the correct time to cut them off. Thirdly, your enemy will almost always head towards the objective, either to capture or defend it. It's always a good idea to put some sticky bombs around the objective to lock it down, just like it is with a regular sticky bomb launcher. This can be slightly more difficult on modes where the objective is subject to movement, such as payload or capture the flag. On payload, it might be better to put your stickies along the cart's path or along the routes where the players might try to approach it from. On capture the flag, it might be better to not play capture the flag. Finally, on each map, there are certain routes that your enemy is most likely to take, and these are good places to guard with your stickies. It might be, as I said before, a path to the objective, a flank route, or a way to a health pack. This usually comes down to map knowledge, so get familiar with the map you're playing on if you want to be as effective as possible. Protecting the objective is especially noteworthy with the Scottish Resistance. Because of your increased ability to keep traps up at all times, you can stop any push that isn't prepared to deal with them. Even if your opponents notice your trap and destroy it, you will have caused them to waste time that could have been spent completing the objective instead. You might think this would be less useful on offense.
Wrong, sir. Wrong!
As it turns out, you can't actually defend the objective if you aren't able to get close to it, so this lets you prevent your team's captures from being contested. This goes back to what I said about playing in a way that's sort of passively aggressive. It's very similar to using leveled sentries on offense, which can work if you know what you're doing. It's also important to know that just because you can't sticky spam per se doesn't mean you can't sticky snipe. This will still be an option, since the further the bombs travel, the less arm time will be left once they hit the ground. The biggest difference with the Scottish Resistance is that instead of trying to detonate in midair, you should wait for them to hit the ground, and instead of aiming at where people are, you should aim at where they're going. Once again, I must stress that it's important to get good at predicting your opponent's movements for this to work. However, you won't be able to get away with using this in close-range combat in the same way that you would when spamming the stock launcher or quickie bomb launcher.
Nice.
So it's important to have traps set up in advance for close-range combat, and to get good at aiming your pipes. This is because, as you are unable to rely on sticky spam at close range, your pipes and traps will be your only means of self-defense in the event of a combat scenario. In aid of this, it seems like a good time to discuss what weapons the Scottish Resistance pairs well with. For your primary, you should use the Iron Bomber, although stock is a valid choice if you don't like adhering to the meta.
They see me rolling.
There's a good reason the Iron Bomber is so widely used, though. The pipes don't tumble, which makes aiming them easier. They also have a slightly larger hitbox, and because they essentially stop moving once they hit the ground, it's much easier to deal damage with rollers. I can't tell you how many times I finished off a player, usually a scout, who thought they had dodged me, only to walk right on top of a grenade. You shouldn't use the loose cannon because it's the worst grenade launcher at close range, which is counter to your needs as a Scottish Resistance demo. You also shouldn't use the lock and load because it's bad, and you should never use it at all, let alone in a set where you rely more heavily on your primary weapon for self-defense.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
For your melee, stock is always the best choice when you're not going Demonite.
I am the spy.
Nearly all of Demoman's melee weapons come with a significant downside, and even the Scotsman's Skullcutter, which seems like a pretty good weapon at first, has a slower switch speed. In fact, nearly all of them have a slower switch speed, which prevents you from dealing damage quickly, and given that melee weapons are usually reserved for emergency situations where speed is key, this is a pretty big downside. The lone exception to this is the Pain Train, which is really the only decent alternative to stock. Though it does increase bullet vulnerability by 10%, and bullets are the most common type of damage, the increased capture rate can make it worth the risk, and its lack of reduced switch speed means you'll still be able to use it quickly if need be.
What even?
My goals are beyond your understanding.
However, this depends on what mode you're playing. If you're on defense or playing a mode with no carts or points, this weapon will provide no benefit at all. You also shouldn't bother using it unless you're planning on doing a lot of the capping. In general, Demoman's stock melee is always the most reliable, and by stock I of course mean a reskin of stock, unless you're boring. Seeing as that last clip ended on a melee crit, let's talk about a different kind of crit. Crit stickies. Yeah, I know, you guys don't like crits, but you might as well make use of them anyway. Besides, crit stickies are actually more skill-based than any other type of crit, as long as you're actually using them for traps. And with this weapon, that's exactly what you'll be doing. Okay, it's time to talk about damage numbers. Up until this point, the specific damage numbers for stickies haven't really been that important, but if you want to really understand how powerful crit stickies are, you need to understand how their damage is calculated. Sticky bombs have a base damage of 120, but their actual damage is influenced by two factors: how close a target is to them, and how close you are to them. For sticky bombs that have existed for less than 5 seconds, their damage will be reduced by up to 50% based on how far away you are. However, if you are close enough, you can gain up to 20% bonus damage. Both the fall off and ramp up lose their effect once a sticky bomb has existed for longer than 5 seconds, but all sticky bombs will also deal up to 50% less damage based on the proximity of their target, regardless of how old they are. Sticky bombs have a splash radius of 9.1 feet, or 146 hammer units. At the very edge of this, the sticky bomb's damage will be halved, and in the very center, it will not be reduced. These values stack multiplicatively, so a non-critical sticky bomb that is younger than 5 seconds will deal between 25% of its base damage, 30, and 120% of its base damage, 144. After 5 seconds pass, it will deal between 50% of its base damage, 60, and 100% of its base damage, 120. The damage calculations for critical sticky bombs are much simpler. Critical hits ignore both ramp up and fall off, and deal 3 times what they normally would based on the target's proximity. Thus, a critical sticky bomb will deal between 180 and 360 damage. That's potentially enough to kill anyone but an overhealed heavy. And even the minimum damage will require overheal to survive for anyone but a Demonite with health increasing items, a soldier, or a heavy. To put it simply,
That's a lot of damage!
Oh, and before you ask, yes, sticky bombs can deal mini crits in the same situations as other weapons would. The damage calculation is the same, but mini crits allow for ramp up. So if you detonate them before the 5 seconds are up from far away, you'll deal a minimum of 41 damage, but if you get very close, you could deal up to 195. After that, the damage will be between 81 and 162, regardless of your distance to it. The thing about sticky bombs, though, is that you can place more than one. So what these numbers mean in reality is that any trap you make that involves these critical stickies will just destroy everything. I mean, except for buildings. Buildings are immune to crits, but whatever. Suffice it to say, crit stickies are really powerful. But there's one problem, which you've probably run into yourself as a stock Demoman. As I said before, the stock sticky bomb launcher makes it difficult to preserve your traps for later use, and this obviously extends to crit stickies as well. Here, let me show you. Has this ever happened to you? You randomly shoot a crit sticky, and you want to use it for a really effective sticky trap, but then you detonate and they all blow up because you can't detonate individual sticky bombs? Well, have I got a product for you. Thanks to the abilities of the Scottish Resistance, you can really take advantage of those crit stickies. Since you don't have to detonate all your sticky bombs at once, you won't have to waste that massive damage boost, and you can save it for the perfect time to strike. If you have some time to spare, you can even try to force the game to give you crits.
Give it to me. Give it to me.
Which can be done more quickly because of the faster firing speed. And your ability to detonate sticky bombs selectively means that if you want to, you can prevent a crit from ever self-detonating by detonating other bombs to avoid going over the sticky bomb limit. Plus, you can store more crits because you can have more sticky bombs out at once.
Using crits effectively will make it much easier to kill heavies. Heavies have a lot of health, but the Scottish Resistance already makes killing them much easier, since with 14 sticky bombs that can each deal up to 120 damage, you can set up multiple traps with a combined damage of 1,680, enough to kill an overhealed heavy 3.7 times over. Now, triple that damage, so that a single sticky bomb can potentially kill a non-overhealed heavy, and you should have absolutely no trouble tearing through their massive health pool.
I fear no man, but that thing, it scares me.
Speaking of crits, did you know that the Kritzkrieg works really well with this weapon? The other Medigun's Uber charges don't work as well with this weapon because they're meant to be used very aggressively in direct combat. If a medic uses an Uber on you, you won't gain much from it in terms of sticky bombs because being resistant to damage doesn't really make you any better at detonating sticky traps, except for maybe protecting you from headshots. You could use the Uber charge to safely set up a trap in enemy territory, but at that point, why not just blow them up with your grenades? That way you can kill them right away instead of having to wait. The problem with that, though, is that the grenade launcher only has 4 shots before you have to reload, which will waste precious time. I'm sorry to say that the stock Uber encourages sticky spam because it saves time spent reloading. On the other hand, the Kritzkrieg allows you to triple the damage of your sticky bombs at any time and store the extra damage indefinitely. Since storing damage indefinitely is what this weapon excels at, you can probably guess that this works extremely well. Just be extra careful not to die after you do this, otherwise all your carefully laid crit stickies will go to waste. This also benefits the medic, allowing them to use their Uber charge in a situation where they're not in combat while also not wasting it, and continue to build it afterwards. Most Kritzkrieg medics will know this, so if they pop Uber on you at a seemingly random time, you know what to do. If you have a pocket medic, try asking them to switch to the Kritzkrieg, as it's by far the best medigun to use in conjunction with this weapon. The Vaccinator is also a decent option, since its Uber only lasts 2.5 seconds and is therefore likely to have ended by the time you run out of grenades, which means you can still use the Uber charge aggressively while not wasting any of its duration on reloading. Also, it's basically a direct upgrade against anything but sentries, demonites, and spies. The quick fix is also a better option than stock, since this Uber is intended to be used to rapidly heal multiple people and doesn't need to be focused only on you while you're reloading. You will gain a similar benefit to the Kritzkrieg from the buff banner, though to a lesser extent and in a different way. The way the buff banner interacts with sticky bombs is different from the way the Kritzkrieg does. While the Kritzkrieg makes all sticky bombs fired while its effect is active permanently become a crit, the buff banner doesn't take into account when the bomb is fired, only when it is detonated. This provides the upside of it being able to boost your pre-existing traps, but comes at the cost of being able to store additional damage for a later time.
It may seem like the buff banner would pale in comparison to the Kritzkrieg. After all, if you're going purely by damage, mini-crits only increase damage by 35%, a far cry from the 200% increase of a full crit, and even the maximum damage from a mini-crit sticky is still less than the minimum from a full crit. I mean, technically, if you manage to get the effect of the ramp up, a mini crit could deal more, but in reality, the ramp up barely ever comes into play since you have to detonate it very close to yourself and within 5 seconds, and the arm time with this weapon takes up a third of that 5 seconds anyway. Anyway, I digress. The buff banner is actually better in some situations. Specifically, on offense, where the front line is moving away from you, not towards you, and your sticky bombs will need to move with it. Thus, the buff banner is a far better option here.
It allows you to boost damage at the time you need to, without having to prepare in advance, and is therefore much more flexible than the Kritzkrieg. When you place down crit stickies using the Kritzkrieg, that damage is locked to that location. If you place down new ones afterward, the old ones will detonate, meaning you lose out on the critical damage. On defense, it's all well and good to simply maintain a sticky trap until someone walks into it, but on offense, that's not going to work. You'll need to keep repositioning your sticky bombs to put them in a location that is most effective for the current situation, and the Kritzkrieg doesn't really allow for that. This makes it harder to use offensively with sticky bombs, unless you're attempting to sticky snipe. The problem with this is that critical traps will generally accomplish far more than critical sticky sniping will, making this a waste of Uber. On the other hand, with the buff banner, it doesn't matter if the old bombs self-detonate, because the new ones get the same damage buff as the previous ones. This does, of course, come at the cost of having a limited window within which you must detonate your bombs to gain the bonus, but on offense, the time between placing a sticky bomb and detonating it is likely to be a lot shorter than it would on defense anyway, since you'll likely be using your traps more aggressively, by virtue of the task you're presented with. Plus, because detonating more bombs within the effect's duration is more effective, the buff banner works far better than the Kritzkrieg for boosting sticky sniping. Hey, you might as well make use of the mini-crits, right? In addition to boosting your damage, the mini-crits will also negate falloff, removing the penalty for detonating before the 5-second timer is up.
Also, the Kritzkrieg will only affect the bombs you can place down during it, and 8 seconds will never be enough to place down 8 stickies, reload another 6, and then place those. It just takes too long. As a result, the buff banner is capable of affecting more bombs at once than the Kritzkrieg, since it can affect all the sticky bombs you've placed already, and if you've been listening to my advice, you will always have close to 14 sticky bombs down.
With that being said, the Kritzkrieg does increase your damage by a lot, so on defense it's probably going to be stronger than the buff banner will. However, while the buff banner and Kritzkrieg are more suited to offense and defense respectively, neither one is bad when not fulfilling that role. The Kritzkrieg is definitely more difficult to use on offense, and the buff banner doesn't always perform as impressively on defense, but the only weapon in the game that can truly be made useless based on your team is the pain frame.
So don't underestimate the buff banner. 35% damage is nothing to scoff at, especially when it's a 35% increase to a base damage of 120, which is quite a lot to begin with.
As a final detail, the increased arm time will change the timing for sticky jumping, but this doesn't really matter all that much. You should just aim it further ahead than usual to compensate, just like you would when using it in combat. Of course, this won't work if you're trying to make a quick getaway, so you can also jump using a sticky bomb that's already ready to detonate, rather than trying to place down a new one.